We're traveling to another dimension, a dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind.
A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of imagination.
Your next stop, the Twilight Zone. The Twilight Zone. The Twilight Zone.
Hey guys, Alf here. I'm back with my review of the second half of the new Twilight Zone, 2019 Twilight Zone, or Jordan Peele's Twilight Zone, whatever you want to call it. And right off the bat, I will tell you that it's not much better than the first half. So if you watched my review for the first half and you saw how much I disliked it and my problems with it, the problems continue, and it's basically the same thing. But yeah, we'll get into it. If you haven't seen my first video on this, I did the first 5 episodes of the season. Now I'm going to do episodes 6 through 10. So let's start with the episode 6, 6 Degrees of Freedom. This episode is probably one of the better ones. It's still not great, but it's better than most of the episodes. I'd probably put it in the top 3. Maybe top 2 even. But it does have a problem that it's boring. It took me like 3 times to watch it. If I had made it through the first time, I might have liked it a little better. But the first time I watched it, I watched like the first 20 minutes, got really bored. Couldn't keep paying attention. I tried to, but it lost my attention from how boring it was. So I just decided to give up on it. But then like a week later, I was like, oh, let me try it again. I tried it again. The same thing happened. So then I was like, well, I'm not going to get past this unless I finish it. So I continued from where I left off as opposed to starting from the beginning. And the second half of the episode is not so bad. I kind of enjoyed it after getting past the first part of the episode. And but the problem with the story is it's a ripoff of The Matrix. It's basically The Matrix done as a story. You get to the end and the ending reveals that the entire story was a simulation, that it's not real. Basically, it's people in the middle of a nuclear war. People are going on an expedition to Mars, basically, to terraform Mars and live there. And the one guy, which is probably the only white guy in the group. I think maybe there was another, but I think he was the only white guy in the group. The people in charge are like 2 black ladies. Well, a black lady and another chick, and they have a relationship or whatever. You know, more regressive stuff, basically. Diversity. But it didn't bother me much in this episode. But the one guy basically is saying, you know, they're off in space and they lost communication and nuclear war happened while they were blasting off, basically. Or it was while they were on the tarmac to take off to go into space. The war was going, you know, things were going nuclear, and their ground control is basically telling them, hey, you have a choice, basically stay here and die with the rest of us or take off. But if you take off, you're not going to be able to communicate with us anymore. We don't know what's going to happen to this, you know, we could be all obliterated and you're never going to hear from us again. So they have trouble. Some people don't want to leave their family, but eventually the captain says, yeah, we're taking off. Fuck it. Let's make it a chance. So they take off. So the whole idea of the story is the guy says that there's a thing called, I forgot what it's called, but it's a certain barrier that says that, you know, life forms have to in order to break that barrier, means that they're going to create habitats on other planets. And that's the barrier that all life needs to cross. And it's not very likely, like more often than not, civilizations kill themselves before they reach the level of technological advancement where they can reach, you know, build communities on other planets and stuff. Exodus, basically. And yeah, so that's basically the theme of the episode. So at one point, when they're on their way to Mars, shit starts freaking out and things on the ship is weird. They don't, you know, they're all getting crazy and stuff because of what's going on. No communication to Earth. And at one point, the guy says, I figured it out. This is a simulation, blah, 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 blah. So they're all like, yeah, this bullshit. You know, they think he's crazy. And he's like, watch, I'll show you it's a simulation. And he basically kills himself. He basically says, to prove it's a simulation, I'm going to put myself in the decompression chamber. And and I bet you, and float off into space, basically. And he's like, and I bet you nothing's going to happen to me because this is a simulation. But he does it, and he does die. And they're all like, oh, no, he's dead. You know, so all this shit happens. They eventually land on Mars, and they're like, we did it. We broke the barrier. Now we're going to build a community on Mars, you know, and there's only like 4 or 5 of them left. But basically 4 or 5 of them are going to build humanity again on Mars. But then we realize that it is all a simulation, and, you know, it's aliens experimenting on them. They're like, oh, humans, these earthlings are smart. They broke the barrier, but, you know, they practically killed their entire species to do it. But, you know, they have potential. And then it's the white guy that was saying, it was what's his name? It was saying it was all a simulation. Is what wakes up basically in that world, and he's like, "Whoa, I knew it," and he basically smiles because it was like, "Oh, I was right." But that was the end of it. So decent story. The execution sucked. They could have made it way more entertaining. It was the first half is super boring, and it's basically The Matrix. So nothing original there. So, but still one of the better episodes. The next one, Not All Men. Oh boy, I have to admit I did like the first half of this. It wasn't that bad. I know the whole concept. The whole concept of this is this girl goes on a date, Thaisa Formiga, and the dude, it's like a dude from work or something, and she goes to his house, and they're hanging out, and they see like a meteor fly by, and it lands nearby, so they're like, "Oh shit, let's go check it out," So he goes to check it out, and he touches it, and he's like, "Wow, it's crazy," and he picks it up and he takes it, and then when they get back to the house, he starts being really aggressive, right? And he starts trying to, basically have sex with her. He's making out with her, touching her, and stuff like that. She keeps saying, "No, no, I don't want to. I don't want to do that. Maybe let's take it slow. Let's go for another day." And he starts flipping out, being like, really aggressive, talking about, "Oh, you don't like me? Why don't you want to make out with me? Is there something wrong with me?" And he starts acting really crazy. So she leaves. She's like, "I'm gonna go. This is really weird." So she leaves. And when she gets a little further away, she looks back, and he's like yelling and tearing up his living room, basically. So the story progresses from there, and we basically find out that all men are becoming really super aggressive and violent, that because of this meteor and blah 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 blah, and they're trying to escape all the crazy stuff. And her sister's husband is freaking out too, and he's like, her sister's husband's like one of these super nice guys, is nerdy and super nice, but then all of a sudden now he's acting all crazy. He made a birthday cake for her, and they came back late, and he's got a knife in his hand, and he's like, "You didn't come for the cake, you gotta blow out the candles," and he's like yelling at her, "Blow out the candle," and she's like, "What's happening?" So yeah, basically you get the gist. It's basically that. It's basically them trying to escape this world, this area where men are flipping out and attacking people. And this is where this gets super retarded at the end, and it turns it into a terrible episode, because the whole thing has a feel of a horror movie. I know it's like a lot of people are going to be like, "Oh, feminism, it's men being aggressive, blah, blah." But for most of the episode, I was like, I don't mind that. This is a scary prospect that some sort of meteor comes and spreads some sort of maybe chemical or bacteria that specifically turns men violent, clicks the lizard brain in men and turn them violent. And, and women have to deal with that in the world. And I'm like, well, that's kind of an interesting topic. But then the ending comes and turns this into an entire shitfest of a horrible fucking story that should never have existed. But basically the end tells us that the meteor has nothing to do with these men turning violent. Men are just violent. That's just what it tells you, basically. Men are just naturally violent, and this meteor is just an excuse to trigger them into being violent. It's not really anything. The scientists have checked it out. There's really nothing with these meteorites. They're just pieces of rock. It's not affecting men at all. It's just an excuse. Men are just violent. It's fucking retarded. Worst ending ever. Something else that's weird about this is, when this show was first announced and they had a list of the episodes, this episode was the only one that seemed to be an adaptation of a story already written, called the Screwfly Solution. And the Wikipedia for this Twilight Zone series said that it said adapted from the Screwfly Solution by James Tiptree Jr. And then and when I looked at the Screwfly Solution Wikipedia, it said this was adapted for the Twilight Zone under the name Not All Men. But when the episode came out and I watched it, I went back to check it out, because I was like, this doesn't seem anything like Screwfly Solution. Well, not anything, but it's got the general idea, but it's very different. The Screwfly Solution story did not end in the way that said men are just violent. There was actually a reason why, like a supernatural reason why the men were turning violent. The Screwfly Solution was a story written by James Tiptree Jr. Back, I think, in the 70s. And it's basically the same story, but it's called the Screwfly Solution because it's a story about these certain flies that were over-infesting a certain area, and scientists, which in real life, actually, this part, and scientists decided to take away I think it was take away men's libido or something like that, and it turned or ability to breed, and it automatically turned them all very aggressive, and they all started attacking each other. So the science fiction story that James Tiptree wrote was basically if we did that to humans, right? And then that's why they did that to the men. The men started being aggressive, and all the men in the world were getting super aggressive and attacking women and each other, and it was just super violence. But it doesn't end with it being. I don't remember the story too well. I read that story a long time ago, and I don't remember the ending too well. But I do remember that the ending wasn't that men are just fucking violent and they're using something else as an excuse. I think it was actually some sort of like thing that nature was fighting back or something, you know. So it naturally made men aggressive, so that they could as a way to like minimize population and stuff and damage the earth. Something like that. I could be wrong. But basically, yeah, not all men. Terrible. Oh, well, the reason I brought up the Screwfly solution is now when that episode came out and I went to go look again because I was like, wow, this ending, that's not how Screwfly solution ended. Did they just do that just for like virtue? But when I look it up, now it doesn't say that anymore. And nowhere do I find it that it says that. I go to the Screwfly solution Wikipedia, which I remember a couple months ago said that it was adapted as Not All Men for Twilight Zone. It's not there anymore. I look here on the Twilight Zone 2019 TV series Wikipedia. It doesn't say it's an adaptation anymore. They took that part out and it just says written by Christina Chloe? Oh, no, that's the director. Written by Heather N. Campbell. Weird. I don't know why they changed it. I don't know if it's actually adaptation. I don't know if they were just inspired by it. It's not the same story. I mean, the Screwfly solution was adapted for... What's the name of that? Masters of Horror, for the second season of Masters of Horror. And I think Joe Dante directed it. It was pretty good. And it was accurate to the story in the book. This one's not accurate at all, and I guess maybe so I don't know why they took it off that it was adapted by it. I don't know if it was like, well, it's too different, or maybe it was a mistake where it was too similar and people thought it was an adaptation. They were putting up the information on the internet and it was such a similar concept that they were like, oh, this is an adaptation of Screwfly solution. It could go that way, or it could go that it was an adaptation of Screwfly solution. Then they saw it's so different that maybe the people who own the rights to Screwfly solution were saying, we don't want to be a part of that. It's too different. And maybe it's because of the regressive shit at the end and saying it's too different and you're basically throwing all men under a bus. We don't want to be associated with that. Your story is not an adaptation of this story that we own. So, that could be possible too. So let's move on. But that is a weird thing that happened with that. And I really, really wonder why it was put up as an adaptation of it and now it's not. I really would like to know. So if anybody out there wants to do the research or knows anything about it, let me know. And maybe I'll make a video on that if I find out anything. The next one, Point of Origin. Crappy. I did not like this one either. It's basically, like, I guess a rich lady, a housewife who lives kind of like a happy, it's like a housewife who lives kind of like a luxurious lifestyle. She owns a big house, and suddenly her housekeeper asks her for a favor and she's like, my cousin, blah, blah, blah. Basically, her housekeeper is a Latina immigrant and, asking her for help for like citizenship and stuff for her, I think for her cousin, not even for herself, something like that. But, she's like, yeah, of course I'll help you, blah, blah, blah. She's a really nice lady. But, eventually she gets taken in by, what they call HSI, like Homeland Security, I guess, or like, the immigration people. La migra! And, she doesn't know what's going on and all this stuff. And, they're basically holding her for like immigration. I'm not even going to go too deep into the story. It was stupid. At the end, you end up finding out she's from another dimension. She's a refugee from another dimension who came to this planet. Her husband and kids didn't know, and they were even like pushing her away, and they're like, no, we don't want to have anything to do with you, but you don't realize till the end. But the whole time she's going through the whole process that immigrants go through when they get caught and they're illegal, and she gets put in a holding cell and with other immigrants, and she sees her housekeeper there, who's a total fucking bitch to her afterwards. Anyway, I mean, it was really funny to me and made, personally, I feel like you're supposed to sympathize with the housekeeper, but it was the opposite. I thought she was a complete bitch. Like at the beginning, the housekeeper's asking her for a favor, like all nervously. And the lady who, the housewife was like, yeah, of course I do it. You've been working for us for years, and you're like a friend to me. Like I love, like she basically loves this girl. It was like, yeah, you've been great to me. You're my friend. Of course I'm gonna help you and your family whenever you need it, basically. But then when they meet each other in the holding facility for immigrants, she's like, oh, now you know how we feel. You never see us, blah, blah, blah. Of course she saw you. She said she'd do any favor for you. You know what I'm saying? So it's stupid, but it's like, I guess you're supposed to, if you're the immigrant or you're the person seeing it from the immigrant side, you're supposed to be like, yeah, you never see us. You're getting what you deserve. But it was stupid because she didn't really deserve that at all. Like, it didn't make any sense. But that's kind of what it's doing. But yeah, at the end, she's a refugee from another dimension, and they send her back to her dimension, and everybody turns their back on her family, which is retarded, because if you marry somebody, you love them. If you married an immigrant and they're threatening to send the immigrant back to their country, you're not going to grab your kids and be like, oh, you don't have a mommy anymore, fuck that lady. That's retarded. That's not going to happen. That doesn't happen. And yeah, this story's kind of 100% a giant virtue signal for immigration, for immigrants and illegal immigration, 100%. And I'm not saying you can't do that. You can do that, but there's proper ways to do it. This episode just did it in the most ridiculous ways that didn't make any sense. Just to find out at the end that, oh, she's a refugee from another dimension. It's way over the top, way in your face, not subtle at all. This is the opposite of what the Twilight Zone is. You know what I'm saying? The Twilight Zone will do shit like that. This is the opposite of it. And so was the last episode, the Not All Men one. Those two episodes are really the complete, utter opposite of what the Twilight Zone is and what it's supposed to be. But yeah, that episode was dumb. Let's get to the next one. The Blue Scorpion, another shitty episode. Horrible. Might be... This one, in some ways, I could say this one's like the worst episode. And it's only because it doesn't do shit. And like All Men and like Not All Men, it has almost the same ending, but I'll get to it. Basically, it's Chris O'Dowd and his dad died, and he's like, and he gets a package, which was like a package that his dad sent to him, I think, or it was like his dad's gun or something. He opens it up, it's a gun. And it's a gun called the Blue Scorpion. It's all like nice and shiny, and it has blue scorpions on it. And it was like something that his dad was researching. It was like a research project, but it came to him. So now he has it. And basically what it is the gun. It's like a special gun. It's mythological. It's meant to be, like people look at it and it has a history of being magic or whatever. But basically what happens is he's somebody who's like anti-gun. He doesn't care much about guns, but he starts getting the urge to want it. So basically the gun is making him want to use it, right? And he starts going to a shooting range. He starts liking it, and he's like, yeah. So now he's getting obsessed with this gun. He tries to but he's also been struggling against being obsessed with the gun, So while he's starting to love the gun, he's trying not to love the gun as well, which is a cool dynamic. And could be done really well, but they didn't do it too well. But, meanwhile, he's trying to get rid of it. It keeps coming back to him. There was a guy at the beginning he tries to sell it to, like a gun pawn shop kind of place, and he's been trying to sell it to him. The guy won't leave him alone. He keeps calling him because he's like, dude, people are willing to give you millions of dollars for this, man. We could both be rich, sell it. And the guy's like, it's not for sale. He wanted to sell it at first. Found out it's like a one-of-a-kind thing that people have been looking for. Gun collectors have been looking for like decades. And, like I said, they're willing to spend millions. Afterwards, the guy keeps calling back, and he won't leave him alone. He just constantly calling like, please, let's sell this, man. It's huge. We're going to both be rich. And yeah, he won't sell it. And then eventually gets to a point where he's getting so obsessed with it that he's probably going to, he's thinking about killing someone with it, but he wants to get rid of it. So he does. And he throws it in the fucking ocean or lake, whatever it is. Stupid. The ending makes no sense. Eventually it pops up on the shore on the opposite side of the lake or beach or whatever it is. I think it's a lake. It's like he's in the city, throws it out, and it ends up on the other side of the lake to like a rural area. And there's two kids throwing stones into the water from there, and they see the gun, and they're like, hey, look at this. And they're like, start playing with it, and they're pointing it at each other, and the episode ends. But it's kind of an ending like Not All Men, where it's like, no, there's nothing magical about this gun. Guns just make you want to shoot people. Which is stupid. We all know guns don't make you want to shoot people. I'm not pro-gun or anti-gun either, but it's just stupid concept for a story. This is where these stories don't work because they go for the narrative as opposed to just going to write a good story with a good ending that makes sense. The ending, like Not All Men, really the ending is the meteorites had nothing to do with it. It really just is men are just violent, and that's why they were all flipping out and murdering and killing everybody, and all men were flipping out. Makes no sense. Stupid. Not realistic. Same thing with Blue Scorpion. It ends up, the gun's not really magical. People just see a gun and they want to shoot it. That's just what it is. Stupid. You know what I'm saying? Makes no sense. Oh, God, it's so bad. So now the final episode is not as long as all the other episodes, and it's like a meta episode. It breaks the fourth wall, basically. It's called Blurry Man, and it's a story. This is probably the best episode just because it wasn't as absolutely retarded as all the other episodes and made no sense and shit. But it's an episode where they break the fourth wall, and it's an episode of them filming an episode of this new Twilight Zone with Jordan Peele. And Jordan Peele's one of the writers for Jordan Peele what she does is she writes the narration that Jordan Peele does at the beginning and the end of an episode. Seth Rogen's there, but he doesn't act. He's playing a guy who's the actor. Well, I mean, he's playing Seth Rogen, but he's Seth Rogen who's in a fictional episode of this Twilight Zone series because they didn't actually film that episode. It's this episode. And she has to figure out a way to create the narration, and it's not working. Jordan Peele keeps saying, no, that's not right, but he's not being mean about it. He's just like, listen, and he tries to give her advice and say, think about that and take some time and try to think of a good narration. And she can't eventually, everybody leaves and she's left there by herself at the studio, and she's being chased by this blurry man, and it's freaking her out. She's getting scared, and then at the end, it's not a great episode. It's probably the best one because they don't do stupid shit like everything else, but it's kind of just horror. It's just chasing her around. It's not really much to it. In the end, she finds out, hey, it's Rod Serling, and it's like this computer-generated image of Rod Serling and somebody doing an impersonation of his voice, and not well, terribly. Maybe I'll show you a clip if I have one. But
I take it I have your attention. Good. There's a lot to explain.
Fuck. I can't believe you've done this.
He's not doing if you've watched enough Twilight Zone and you've heard Rod Serling speak enough, you're just going to be like, yeah, this is somebody doing a really bad impersonation of Rod Serling. But yeah, that's the end of it. Eventually she ends up, her and Rod Serling talk, and then he takes her into the Twilight Zone, through the door, and it's space and the cosmos and weird things floating around. Not great either, but probably the best one on here because it wasn't some stupid regressive ending or anything. So yeah, that's the last 5 episodes of the season. Nowhere near being better than the first season, the first half, which was shitty. So just as shitty, basically. The only good one, I would say 6 Degrees of Freedom. Boring, but it wasn't so bad. The ending wasn't something super regressive and stupid that didn't make any sense. It did make sense. It's just a ripoff of The Matrix, though. It's been there, done that. Nothing new or creative there. Yeah, we went through all of them. Wow. Not All Men, garbage. But Not All Men was actually good until you get to the end, and it's garbage. You don't expect that. You get to the end. I was watching, I was like, dude, this was actually a decent episode of the new Twilight Zone. Not bad. And then he went to the end where it was like, well, actually, the meteorites didn't cause any of this. They're just rocks. The men are just violent, and they're using this as an excuse. And I was like, what? Retarded! I forgot to mention that it also, the men being violent and angry makes this effect where they keep getting angrier and more violent, and it makes this effect on their face that their veins start popping out, and you see blotches of discoloration on their skin, which also leads to the end making no sense, because if men were just violent and the meteorites weren't affecting them, then why are they having these weird supernatural effects on their skin, visible effects of veins popping out more than humanly possible, and more than what's natural, and blotches of their skin? It made it seem like there was some sort of supernatural thing taking over their bodies and making them violent, but no. So that's why it doesn't make any sense, and it's stupid. They messed up big time on that. No way I could take that. That just destroyed the entire story, so it would have been good without that. Point of origin, complete garbage, useless story. Just doesn't do shit. Blue Scorpion's just the same, doesn't go anywhere, stupid, doesn't make any sense. And then Blurry Man, which was only 30 minutes, I think, as opposed to the hour long of the rest. Not bad, but not good either. It was just kind of a useless episode. I could have done without it. Like, they really didn't need to put that in there. And, but that's it. That's the whole thing. What can I say? It's funny how regressive this is. Normally, I don't, like, really, if you do want to put regressive things into stories and stuff, I don't mind if you do it right. You know what I'm saying? If you do it subtle, if it's not so in your face, if you don't let it drive the story, I don't mind. Because when you let your narrative drive the story, you take it to ridiculous places, which is what's happening in this. And almost every episode in here ends terribly and has ridiculous endings that don't make any sense. They're not entertaining in any way. They don't surprise you. They surprise you by going in the wrong direction. You actually watch this and you think of better directions that these things could go, and you're like, oh wow, it's gonna end with something that's creative, and you're like, oh yeah, that's cool, that's very original, very creative, and then it ends and you're like, whoa, that went in completely the wrong direction. That doesn't make any fucking sense, and is just boring and lame endings because their priority isn't to write a good story. Their priority isn't to write something that's going to surprise you or shock you. Their priority is to lead you to the conclusion of their narrative. So, like, for instance, Not All Men is there to lead you to the conclusion that men are just violent. We can't do anything about it. Men are violent, and all men should realize that they're violent and stop being violent. Which is ridiculous. I'm not violent. I'm probably one of the least violent people I know. So this story means shit to me. It's retarded. You know what I'm saying? And I know not all men are violent. And it's funny they called it Not All Men. It's like they wanted to let you know. Or they're making a jab at people saying, well, not all men are violent. So they called it that to take a jab at those people. Yeah, not all men, right? Well, look at this. Which is a bullshit fictional story. But that's a big problem with these. Is that they just let the narrative speak. Another thing I noticed, and I didn't notice till, I finished the whole thing, is there's rarely a male protagonist, a white male protagonist in this. And it's not just white male protagonist, because the protagonist would be very specific, but there's hardly ever white male leads. And when I say protagonist, I mean, when you do have white male leads or white males in these stories, they tend to be antagonists or just bad people. We can start from the beginning. The comedian is the lead is Pakistani guy. I think Camille Nanjiani is Pakistani, and then and there's a black woman in it, and there's barely any white guys in it. The one white guy that is in it is a fat comedian who's an asshole to them all the time, who's just constantly an asshole, and he makes them disappear at one point because the guy's an asshole. You end up finding out the guy's really not an asshole because when he starts. Because he's always making fun of Camille being a shitty comedian, but when Camille's finally making people laugh and being a good comedian, the fat guy's laughing and he's giving him a thumbs up. So he really wasn't an asshole. He's just, picking on him, fucking with him. But he makes him disappear anyway. But in the end, he's made to look bad. The Nightmare at 30,000 Feet, the main character is a white guy. It's Adam Scott. And the other guy who's trying to help him out is also a white guy, but it ends up at the end, the other guy was actually I don't know, you could say a terrorist, but a hijacker, and he's going to crash the plane. And the whole time that the protagonist, the white guy, was trying to figure out a way to prevent the plane from crashing, he actually assisted in, and at the end, all the crew comes and they kill him because he's actually an antagonist. Another guy looks stupid. It looks like it's a guy who's trying to do good who ends up causing the terrible thing that happens. Think about that for a second. That probably has many regressive points in there trying to say, hey, white males, you're not being proper allies or something, right? So, the replays about the black mother and with the recorder. Yeah, again, the white guy is the cop who's a villain. He's the enemy. He's the antagonist of the story who's super racist, just wants to kill him. A traveler, yeah, an Alaskan native, I guess you could say. Inuit, I don't know what you want to call them, is the main character. She's one of the cops. The white guy who's her boss is actually a traitor. He's the antagonist, and it's all brought upon by this Asian guy who's playing an alien. So yeah, again, you got that one. 6 Degrees of Freedom, the captain and is a black woman. You know what I'm saying? That it's like the only white guy was the guy who knew what was going on, but he was portrayed as being crazy and all, just nuts and shit. Not all men, of course. The antagonists were all men. Point of origin, yeah, no, protagonist was a white woman. But the white woman ends up, being a refugee from another dimension and being sent back and getting her comeuppance for the way people treat immigrants, that she wasn't treating them that way. So it didn't make any sense to take it out on her. Blue Scorpion was the only one with a white male protagonist that wasn't fully shown a bad light. But if you think about it, it's about him and his struggles not to use this gun and eventually get rid of it. So he was a good one. That was one where he was a protagonist. But in the end, it's kind of the idea of, hey, you're a white male, you must be obsessed with guns. You know what I'm saying? Because, these regressive people always show, rednecks and white people are the ones that use guns. Nobody else uses guns. Minorities don't use guns. So, yeah, it was kind of silly with that. And even when he throws it in the water and it shows up on the shore on the other side, the two little kids who pick it up are two little white kids, two little white boys. And then Blurry Man, the protagonist was a black girl. And Jordan Peele, basically. Unless you count Rod Serling, which you don't see till the very end and is computer generated. So in the end, we went through 10 episodes, and only 2 episodes had white male protagonists, or at least leads, and in both episodes, they're both portrayed to not be all that great of people, and it's kind of a lesson for them and not for anyone else. Which is funny, because when I go back and I think about the lessons people learn, we can go again, the comedian, all right, well, the first one, which I found to not be too bad, the comedian was a lesson for that guy, for the Pakistani guy. Nightmare 30,000 Feet, lesson for a white guy. Replay, the lesson was not for the protagonists. Actually, I don't even know what the lesson's there, but I guess the lesson's for white people, basically. The Traveler, same thing. It was a lesson for white people. Wonderkind. Oh, I skipped Wonderkind before, but Wonderkind, the protagonist was an Asian guy, and the antagonist was a little white boy who becomes president, right? But again, this one, there's really no lesson in this one. It's just stupid. I think it was just a jab at Trump. 6 Degrees of Freedom. There was no lesson for anybody there either. Not All Men. Yeah, the lesson is men are violent. Point of Origin. The lesson is about immigrants to white people. Again, Blue Scorpion. Again, the lesson is about guns to white people. It's strange, right? And this is a problem. This is a serious problem, and why this sucks. I thought this would do terrible, because I don't see how anybody could like this. The stories are just so shitty and lame, horrible. But yeah, it was renewed. It was instantly renewed. The second it aired, it was instantly renewed for a second season. So we'll see how the second season goes. Maybe they'll realize it. I did see an interview with Simon Kinberg, and he said that this season was rushed. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe they couldn't get the stories written out in time, and that they had to rush it so they could start filming right away. And I don't know. Or maybe the stories were only slightly done, and they had to just make it up as they were filming and rewrite as they were filming. Who knows? I hope they could do better the second season. I really would like a new Twilight Zone that was good. It could be done good too, and I don't understand why they can't. And I guess it just depends on who's getting it. I mean, I've seen interviews with Jordan Peele where he's being very regressive, and sometimes he's not regressive, and sometimes. But I saw an interview with him recently where he said that he would never hire a white male lead or a white lead or something like that. Why not? Like, what? Why not just hire the person who's best for the story, who fits the story best? Why does everything have to be about race? It's ridiculous to me. And normally it doesn't bother me so much, but with this, when they do shit like this, it does bother me, because they don't realize how bad it is. They don't realize how doing this ruins stories and is not interesting, is corny. The only people who are going to like these stories are people who think those things. And maybe that's what they want. But people who think those things aren't liking this story because it's a good story. They're liking these things because it affirms their thoughts and ideas. You know what I'm saying? Like the episode with the black lady and her son, who the cop is chasing down, and she keeps rewinding. The ending to that story made 0 sense. It made 0 sense. There was a part where the cops come for the guy like 30 years after the fact. Why? It didn't make any sense that the cops were coming from there. And I myself thought of better ways to end that story that would have been interesting and made that story great. And made it a good story, even with the regressive stuff from before it. One certain ending, if there's certain endings that if you ended it right, it would fix the whole story and people would have liked it. But they didn't do that. They wanted to go with the narrative so much that they went in a direction that didn't make any sense. And it's like, why are the cops there? Can you tell us? Like, is there a reason, or just cops just randomly show up at black people's houses to take them? You know what I'm saying? Made no sense. It just, and that's what I'm talking about. And people who like this stuff, they're not liking it for the right reasons. They're not liking it because, like, wow, this was a well-written story, great structure. The ending made total sense, and I didn't see it coming, but it led up to that, and it was so good. You know, that's not why they're liking it. They're liking it because they're watching it and going, yeah, cops are evil. Yeah, get rid of white cops. Yeah, they're always, you know, that's not what you want people to watch your story for. Sure, if you want to put that message in there, go for it. But you don't let it control the story. This is fucking writing 101. I'm not even a writer. And I know that this is writing 101. You know, like, it's, God. Yeah, Twilight Zone, the new series, sucks. 10 episodes, nothing good came out of it. There's some that are better than others. Sure, there's some that are almost good, but none of them are good. All their endings completely suck. They're either ripped off or make no sense, or, you know. If you watch the first part of this, I basically broke down why this show sucks. And the second half doesn't fix any of those problems. It doesn't make it any better. So, thanks for watching, guys. I'm gonna get back to making videos of the old Twilight Zone, the really good one that made total sense and was done right. So I'll catch you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.
It's not all of us.
Maybe there is no cure. Because there's no disease. The meteors, they were a placebo.
There's no cure because it'll always be inside me. What? What? What?
What did you fucking say?
You know, I bet you'd look much cuter if you smiled.
What did you say?
What did you fucking say?
Why don't you try it sometime?
No. 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 No.
Fuck. I can't believe you've done this.